Welcome back. Welcome to another edition of Nain Shorts. Thank you for joining me today. Now, we have this, I don't want to call it division, but there's definitely a lot of conversation that happens between the traditional martial arts and the more modern combative arts and sports and all this and that, and honestly folks, it's all martial arts really. And I recently saw somebody make a point that it's dumb to believe that somebody who does the sports aspect of martial arts and is active in it and is working out isn't going to fare that well in a street fight. Because the reality is they probably will fare pretty well in a street fight. Now, is there more to that in a street fight? Yes, there are other aspects in a street fight that aren't necessarily covered in sports martial arts, as well as there are aspects in traditional martial arts that don't translate well to sports or a real fight. There are a bunch of things, and if we nitpick at everything that doesn't fit with somebody's ideology or a different environment, we're going to be here all day, folks. And reality is that it's just a difference of opinion or a different mindset. That's not to say that each one of those things isn't good, because they are. They all have something positive to add to somebody's life, depending on what you're focusing, depending on what you're trying to accomplish through your training. Nothing negative about any one of those things. Would I ever want to get into the ring with somebody who trains to fight on a regular basis? No, I'm at a disadvantage. I don't train like that. Do I want to get into a street fight? No, I train for it, but I definitely don't want to be a part of one. But I do feel a bit more comfortable being in a street fight, simply because, well, I can hit them with whatever it is I can grab at that point, and whatever cheap thing I can do to win, I'm going to do it. Pulling hair, poking eyes, hitting the groin, distractions, throwing stuff in their face. All those things in my mind are valid things to do in a street fight when somebody's trying to cause you harm. That's not valid in the ring. They're not going to allow me to use a stick in the ring unless it's an actual stick fight, and even then we're padded and have helmets. So it's all different contexts in which you use. But when it comes to traditional martial arts, when it comes to the structure of things, we oftentimes lose their significance. Now, what do I mean by lose their significance? We train a martial art, we have a curriculum, we have the movements specified by the instructor, the creator, and that's what we mimic. Yes, folks, we mimic. Oftentimes, that is how we start the training, by copying the movements. Is there physical training involved? Yes. Is there things that you can do, exercises to develop certain aspects, from leg strength, from having a proper horse stance, from being able to tuck your tailbone in, the structure, the strength that you develop? Yeah, all those things, but that's exercising. You can do that also in the gym, not necessarily in just the martial arts. So what are you taking away from these martial arts? You learn forms, you learn movement, you learn balance transition, you learn footwork, but it's taught in a specific context, and that doesn't always translate well outside of the class. Great for the curriculum, outside of the class, not so much. And folks, I'm not saying that that's a negative thing. That's just the traditional martial arts. That's the way it's taught. But that doesn't mean you're not learning something significant. And for somebody from the outside in who hasn't done that particular traditional martial art or any traditional martial art, it is very difficult to see the end result of how it becomes something useful later on. I myself am training in Kaju Kempo, island style Kaju Kempo, with GM Bob Gomez, and even he has changed a lot of the things that he felt were no longer applicable in the fight, because the evolution of fights has happened. It is continuously happened. Different ideas pop up, different things become the norm. So yeah, there's an evolution that has to happen with your art in order for it to be adaptive. That evolution doesn't necessarily mean get away from the traditional stuff. It's understanding how the traditional stuff can then be effective in the real world. For me, first punch art, right? I step off to my left, parry, replace with an outward block, kick, step down, hammer fist, and then I punch. The idea behind that is that as a punch is coming, I'm avoiding it. Not only am I avoiding it, I'm also putting a parry up because, hey, I might not be fast enough to get out of that punch. I replace it with this, frees up my hand, but it also blocks in case the next punch is coming. So you see, already I'm understanding what these movements are meant to be, and that's the difficult part. Because when do you start giving this information to your new student? Now, if a student has nothing behind them, it's kind of too early for you to actually give them. You have to learn the simple movements, even though you don't understand what they're for just yet, so you can get the motor skills behind it. Especially if you don't have a developed sense of your own body mechanics and movement, then yeah, you do have to go through the steps. But ultimately, you break down, once you get to a certain level, a certain degree of understanding, what those things actually mean. What is this? Well, one, am I stepping to a different size? No, I'm stepping to where my range is most effective, because I'm just trying to avoid this fight, which means I have to understand my range. There's a lesson in itself that could be utilized for the student. As I step out, okay, my hands up, getting my hands up. The moment a fight happens, are my hands down here? Are they here? Am I training to respond from different hand positions? There's another lesson there that could be added and supplemented. So this one art, this one piñon, or I'm sorry, in this case, punch art, technique, that's the word I was looking for. This one technique then can become effective because this and this are individual pieces. You're learning them in sequence, but you're not going through them in sequence. And that's the part that people oftentimes, or all too often, forget or never consider, especially for those that are outside of the art looking in. Oh, that's never going to work. Oh, that's not effective. Because you don't understand what comes next. And you're absolutely right also in the sense that it will not work the way it was taught. But you can learn so many other things, individual pieces that go along with it. And if you teach your students to understand that, and more importantly, teach your students how to break those things up, start developing their own ideas and the things that they feel are going to be effective for them. Maybe they are fast enough to avoid a punch and they don't need the parry. Maybe they're too slow on their feet and they need this parry to be super effective. So then they develop that. And these are the things then individuals start becoming more attuned to. And believe it or not, or actually, I can't say this for certain, this is mostly my opinion, a lot of the arts were developed that way. Some individual back whenever the art was starting up or whenever the art became big learned how to do it and then added his own ideas, added their own ideas, their own way of movements. Maybe they were really fast and agile, so somehow their version of that art became about footwork, became about movement, became about dynamic interaction with your opponent, like a dance. For other people, they were strong, they hit hard, they were very rigid. So the art morphed into a bit more of a rigid sort of movement. For others, it was more of an internal thing. Their breathing became a big part of it, the way that they moved with their breath, and that art took that form. People have added their own individual tastes to it and made it an art form, and then it got disseminated into a bunch of people. And we want to keep it traditional to the way that it was taught. But ultimately, each and every one of us is going to add our own little flavor to it because we are individuals, and it's going to morph into whatever it's going to become for the individual. Now, are you going to teach the way you do it, or are you going to teach people to do it their way? Still teach the traditional stuff, still teaching the art the way that it was taught to you. But if we can also, along with it, teach our students to think beyond it, well, then they can make of it whatever they want, just the way we did. Because, yes, many of us do teach traditional arts and keep it traditional, but also many people have created traditions out of their own way of doing things. I'm not saying one is right, one is wrong. I'm just saying that we can take and learn a lot from every aspect of martial arts, whether it's the traditional, whether it's the sports, or it's the combative, the applicable ideas of a real fight. There is so much to take from it. We don't, or actually none of us have the whole picture, and these are great times for us to understand and cross-train each other. If our first thought is to put something down and be negative about it, we're never going to learn, and we're never going to bridge that gap. We're never going to gain the understanding to know why something is taught the way it is, or more importantly, how we can take that and make it effective for us and our needs. So, just a thought, guys. Thank you very much for joining me on another one of Nain's Shorts. Till the next one, as usual, 3, 2, 1, cut!